Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Bread Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family. Today on Sue's Healthy Minutes, it's time for yet another It's the Bread story. My guest today is Jami McQuivey. Jami has a powerful testimony and ministry. She actually reached out to me way back in March of this year to share a little bit about her health journey. I reached out right away to have her as a guest on my podcast, Sue's Healthy Minutes, but somehow I never followed up to schedule the interview. With my busy travel and class schedule, our emails had simply gotten lost in the shuffle. And it wasn't until recently when Jami reached out to me to ask me to be a guest on her podcast that I realized I had dropped the ball and that she had quite the story to tell. So we finally connected, and I am so glad we did. Jami, thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm just going to give you the opportunity to tell a little bit about yourself and where you're from.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Jami McQuivey, and I am a holistic nutritionist, Ayurvedic practitioner, and an herbalist. But I started doing that when I lived in Iowa and, was trying to get better. I was feeling very sick. So I've traveled all over the world. I lived in China, traveled Tibet, lived in an RV for 10 years, traveling the US and Canada. And then we went to Europe, and then we somehow landed in St. George, Utah.
That's amazing. St. George, Utah. So your bread journey actually is a funny one. It began about 25 years ago. And how did that happen? I believe you said your mother-in-law gave you a meal, and it was actually a necessity at the time.
Yeah. So when I first married my husband, we started out really poor, and my mother-in-law gave me her mother-in-law's mill that literally, when I tried to get parts to fix it later on, they stopped making parts the year I was born. I mean, it was
my goodness.
And then she gave me something like 100 pounds of wheat. And so I learned to make wheat. I learned to eat inexpensively, which was your rice and beans, and making bread at home. And that's how I started.
So you saw some good health benefits then, even as a poor newlywed, as you described yourself. Tell me about that.
Well, I hadn't put things together really, but when I would go to the dentist, I would get a lot of cleaning, a lot of scraping. I always had a cavity of some sort. And when I started making the bread the next time, so it was about 3 months later, and even with my kids, we went in and they looked at our teeth and was like, oh, wow, they look really good. We hardly even had to get them cleaned. And they sent us home. And I was like, honey, there is something about this bread. And so we continued to make the bread. But then as time went on, my husband, he got raises and I was able to buy bread. And so I kind of just slowly got out of the habit, had kids, and didn't realize till much later, after a lot of health issues and inviting bread back in, that truly how powerful it was. It wasn't just helping my teeth, but it was really helping me regain my health.
Yeah. I find that so much, and I think you and I talked about this a little bit earlier, is that sometimes we don't notice things that have changed in our health, or that what something we're eating and doing, the benefits that it's had on our life, until we walk away. And I hear that a lot, especially people say, I had children, I got busy and I just kind of dropped it. Or they'll say, I did it for our children when they were growing up, but now they're all gone. And so I thought, I just won't do this anymore. And then their health starts diminishing. But you noticed that you were thriving on that bread. And then, like you said, when you became a little more financially secure, you were like, I don't need to make this bread. Sounds so much like the way my husband and I started. I made 5 loaves of bread every Saturday. With the first year we were married, we lived in married housing at the University of Georgia, and it was kind of a necessity. That's what we could afford. So, so you began to buy bread and eat more of the store-bought food. You had quite a serious health journey. So what did you begin to notice, and how did your health decline?
Well, I started having these digestive issues, absolute constipation. And then I would start getting like chronic fatigue. And then it got worse. And I started experiencing a lot of pain, and eventually got my gallbladder removed because I was in such excruciating pain most of the time. And I thought that would fix it, right? They said, oh, once you get your gallbladder out, you'll feel so much better.
You'll feel great. Yeah.
It didn't feel better at all. In fact, it started kind of snowballing. I started getting worse. And of course, then I started eliminating food groups. And one of the first ones you eliminate are grains, right? Wheat and grains. And then it's like, okay,
sure.
Then it was like, okay, now I have to eliminate dairy. And then it's all these things. So I started getting smaller and smaller. And I wasn't getting any help. I kept going to the doctors. And one doctor I had when I told him all my problems, this is a gastroenterologist, and he didn't even look at me, didn't examine me. He just brought me into his office and told me to take Pepto-Bismol. And so I said, is there anything that I should be eating or should not be eating? And this is what he said to me, and I just cringe now. He goes, food doesn't really affect our digestive system.
Oh my goodness.
And I remember thinking, I am in the wrong office. Because at this time I had already gotten my degree and was working towards, I was a holistic nutritionist and really trying to really understand the digestive system specifically. And I was like, I am not in the right room right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then I started going, I had this moment of aha, because as a person who absolutely loves science and history, I always kind of kept it a little bit separated from my scripture study. And I started going, wait, what is God saying about this? Because I just was like, I can't wrap my mind around a God who would create a body for disease, for sickness, for struggle, and I was like, something just didn't feel right. And so I started diving into my scriptures and realizing the bread, the grains, like, why would he say have these in here and then we're not supposed to eat them?
Yeah, I know. That's a real eye opener for a lot of people. But so you really took matters into your own hands. You became a Christian holistic nutritionist, and you now have a practice, don't you? A health professional practice?
Yes, I do. I teach one-on-one, and I have a DIY program that goes through the 7 principles that heal digestion, manage weight, and balance hormones. Because when we take care of our digestive system and we use these whole foods that are so healing and nutrient dense, all of a sudden our energy comes back. We can lose weight, our hormones balance. All of these amazing things happen. And these principles are found in the scriptures and history, and they're now being, studied by science. So we're getting some science-backed information on it.
Yeah. You had some pretty significant health issues. You lost your tonsils, which I talk a little bit about tonsils and what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
You lost your gallbladder. You had hyperparathyroid issues. You had SIBO, which I get a lot of questions about. So I want you to touch on that a little bit. H. pylori, chronic E-coli. When did things begin to change?
So things began to really, really change. Probably about five years ago. So I was doing these things and I was managing, right? Really managing. But I wasn't thriving. And so because I had all these things going on, and I wasn't getting help. I was eating well, but I still hadn't really brought in grains, beans, and those type of things as much anymore as of yet, right? And so I just wasn't doing well. And then about 5 years ago, I really started studying and putting these things back into my diet. And so like you mentioned, like I had my tonsils out. And then hyperparathyroid. So not my thyroid, but the 4 parathyroids underneath, I had to get one removed. And then it's like every time I went into the doctor, he's like, I don't know what's going on, but we should probably take an organ. And I was really tired of getting
of losing organs. Yeah.
I really was. And so I started, I dusted off my grinder and I started incorporating every day at every meal, a bean, a grain, and a green. And suddenly, like, I started to thrive again.
I love that. A bean, a grain, and a green. I love that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, you were a little terrified due to your previous experience. But when you incorporated and, like you said, dusted off your grain mill and started milling your own grain again, even though you had been told wheat was bad, gluten's bad, you need to eliminate all this stuff, how did you react? What did you find out?
Well, from my previous experience, I was still a little confused. I knew that sometimes when I had wheat, and bread, it didn't hurt, but sometimes it was excruciating for me and would cause me to have like headaches and joint pain and all of this stuff. And so as I was learning, I came across some of your information and others' information where I was like, oh my goodness, it's when I mill my grain and make my bread that I don't hurt. Because even the flour is enriched, I have what's the MTHFR gene variant, the C667T, I believe. And it makes it very hard for me to digest anything with folic acid. And that's any bread or anything enriched with folic acid.
Right. Any commercially processed enriched flour, any product. Yeah.
And so why it was confusing to me is because sometimes it's not enriched at the store and sometimes it is. So it was confusing me. But then when I realized that, I just realized that my home milled anything always made me feel better. It helped my digestion. I had no pain. I just felt so much better. And so kind of getting over that fear was that knowledge of knowing what was causing it. And it was that commercial stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So you felt great, no pain. How did it help your H. pylori or your SIBO or your E. coli, or had you already kind of gotten that managed with other, dietary changes?
Well, one of the things that I love that grains do, is particularly wheat and bread, is they satiate you, right? So you're not hungry. And so one of the pitfalls of this of SIBO is that you chronically eat, right? And so they're trying to get you to eat to only have time in between meals to kind of starve out bacteria and stuff like that. So it helped me to maintain that pattern. So the bacteria didn't continue to grow. With that, I did add in some herbs, but really what it did, it helped my body to get the reserves to fight off these infections.
Yeah.
And so I found that I haven't done what a lot of people have done when they get SIBO and H. pylori, like they keep getting it back. They keep getting it back. And for me, that wasn't the case because I've now given my body what it needs to fight off that infection, and I just don't experience that anymore.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never thought about that with the SIBO. It's, that you're just chronically hungry, but you need to stretch it out and give your body time to fully digest that food. And so the fiber does that. It does satiate you. And so, yeah, that's very interesting. Now, the H. pylori and the E. coli, again, you were just giving your body the nutrients to fight those infections?
Yeah. It seemed to like if I was balancing things out and building and making my body stronger. And that's, we talk a lot about like things that break you down and things that build you up. So I stopped doing the things like excessive sugar, stress, not sleeping, doing those things. And so I did, the way God works with us is that and the 7 principles is you are going to make sure you're hydrated. You're going to make sure you're sleeping. You're going to make sure your relationship with God is one that you can trust and kind of relax into a situation. And we're going to use whole foods. And so combining those things and making sure you're getting sunshine, right? Those type of things, my body was just like, thank you. Thank you. This is exactly what I needed.
Yeah. Yeah. So state those 7 principles for us. I think that would be great. I think people are going to go, okay, what are the 7 principles?
So there's first one is temperance. And that's, where we're going to don't eat more than you need. Don't eat less than you need, right? And when I'm teaching these in my DIY courses, it's the 1/3 principle. 1/3 is going to be your digestive juices and fluid that you've hydrated between meals, and about 1/3 for your food and 1/3 space so it could really digest. Then we're going to work on like hydration. And we talk about the difference between intracellular hydration and extracellular. So a lot of people just sit there and drink water. But, Jesus refers to himself as living water, and we start talking about structured water. And so water that has minerals still in it is going to make that difference. Then we talk about breathing, a breathing practice and trust and faith. So this is where we oxygenate the body. And we talk about rest and movement as another one, knowing when to rest and when to move and when to balance. I think I've had women who will come to me and they're exercising so much, trying to lose weight. There was this one lady trying to lose weight. She was exercising a lot. She was eating all these good foods. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take you off exercise and put you on rest. Yeah. And then suddenly she started losing the weight. Her body was so stressed.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes it's as simple as that. Then we have the food. And so we talk about the balance between eating and fasting. And especially for women, knowing when fasting is appropriate, because like the week before our cycle, we need an extra 500 calories a day. And so that is not the time to fast.
Right.
Or to calorie restrict, right? But then after that, we're hungry and we feel great and stuff. So, and then the last one is a spiritual practice and making sure that we're really tuning in and having that faith. And there's just this peace that comes. So we don't have stress, we don't have anxiety and anger and unforgiveness, that we can really bring that the Spirit of God back into our daily lives.
That is so important, and something that is missing a lot of times, and sometimes people say, why do you have to bring spiritual into it? Well, we're spiritual beings. As surely as we're physical, we're spiritual beings. And, I love that about rest and movement. It's so important. And, I even experienced that years ago. I had some adrenal issues because of my hectic, stressful lifestyle. And I, had gained a little weight, and I decided I'm going to join the gym and work out and all this. And I gained like 10 pounds from working out. And I would go to the gym. I'd be all enthusiastic, Monday, Wednesday, by Friday, I couldn't get off the sofa.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? I think I've got to back off of this. And now I exercise and I enjoy it. And I'm 70, so I don't do intense, I do. Yeah. I listen to my body a little bit better, but I just think that's so powerful. And I knew our listeners were going to go, okay, what are her 7 principles? So I'm so glad that we took a moment to emphasize those. Those are just so good. And, so how has the bread specifically helped you, especially with no gallbladder? Because I know there are people, unfortunately, that don't have a gallbladder, and that's not to put any guilt on someone. Sometimes it's a life-saving procedure that needs to be done. So how have you seen that the bread or whatever that you needed to do diet-wise help with no gallbladder? What would you suggest to listeners?
I love this topic. I'm passionate about this topic. When women do not have a gallbladder, or men for that matter, but I'm going to talk specifically to women, this is like the final step of probably 5 or 10 years of digestive distress, right? So just because we got the gallbladder out, that does not fix the digestive issue. That just usually turns off a pain sensor.
Yeah.
So we now have to be even more conscientious of helping our digestive system. And so bread is one of the most delicious, happy-inducing, and healthiest ways to get that in. And so I'll make a loaf of bread, and then I'll have obviously some fresh because I absolutely love it. But then I make croutons out of it, and I make toast out of it. I mean, and then I make cinnamon rolls, and I do all the other things. But I really, really, what I feel it does, especially for those without a gallbladder, is that we have now toxins kind of running rampant in the body, metabolic waste, because we don't have the gallbladder to help us with that anymore. And usually it's not usually I've never known a time where it's actually the gallbladder. It's actually a liver problem.
Yeah.
So the gallbladder gets blamed, but the liver's still struggling.
Yeah.
And so I find that the whole grains and the beans and the greens help the liver to clear and flush and get those toxins out and get it rebalanced again. And I've worked with people who have like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and things, and the bread helps with so many things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the more I've studied, in fact, your testimony really did encourage me to study the gallbladder a little bit more. And so I'm excited about what I've learned, and I'll probably share a little more in detail on the gallbladder in another episode. And I know you and I have talked about that. So you've now started teaching others, and you're hearing your own It's the Bread stories. You said, and I hope you remember in that first email you sent me, that you had one from one of your shy students and you had gotten permission to share. Do you remember what story I'm talking about?
I'm trying to remember. Is it the one with the woman who had the real big hormonal imbalance?
You never shared the story with me in that email, but you just told me that you had another one that you could share. And so you said, so it's going to be 2 for the price of 1.
Oh, okay.
But whatever, if you have another one that comes to mind, feel free to share that as well.
Oh, I have a couple, but this one I loved. So this was a sort of a friend of mine. I knew her from church, and I was starting to teach this bread class. Everybody had all signed up. We had already done the first week. And then she posted and said, "Hey, I accidentally ordered a whole bag of kamut berries instead of kamut flour. What do I do with it?" And I said, "Hey, you know what? I'm doing a bread class. Did you want to come learn?" And she's like, "Sure." At the time, I didn't realize her sure was very reluctant. I thought she was excited to be there, but and so she came to this class, and so a little bit of background on her. She had such hormone imbalance that she was shaving her face twice a day. She was about to be put on insulin. She was on anxiety meds, all of these things. I did not know this. I knew a little bit about the facial hair because you could kind of see that. Anyway, she came and she made a strict decision. She was not changing anything except for the bread. She was going to see if this was really true, because as I was teaching her all these things, that it was, all the ins and outs and how amazing it was. So she didn't change anything. So she learned to make bread. I taught her how to make bread. That next week, she goes, her sugar numbers have all balanced. And by the end of the second week, she's like, this is kind of embarrassing, but this is what she said. It's kind of embarrassing, but I went from shaving twice a day down to once every other day.
My goodness.
Facial hair stopped growing. And then I did a follow-up with her. I have an interview I'm going to be posting on my podcast where I didn't realize that her husband had extreme IBS, that he would come home and he would spend an hour to an hour and a half in the bathroom every night in excruciating pain. And she has a son who's autistic, extremely autistic, or he's high functioning, but he was going
Yeah.
through a lot of struggles. And she goes, Jami, I'm telling you, by just changing the bread, I balanced my hormones. I got off my anxiety medication. I don't have to shave hardly any anymore. My husband is off the toilet and out of pain, and my son is functioning at school. And
Oh,
it is amazing.
oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That is so incredible. I am absolutely overwhelmed by God's goodness and provision. And I just, man, just changing the bread. And she deliberately wanted to see what the bread would do.
Yeah.
That is,
And she, her son who's autistic, he's very picky about what he eats, right? But he would eat this. And so he started eating a lot. And then people at church. And so she started making bread for people at church. And then I had her come in and teach my class at the college and share her testimony. And she was sharing her testimony with these kids who, girls who had PCOS, because that's what she had, PCOS and these digestive issues. And so just by learning to grind her own flour, it has changed her family's life, and she's changing the lives of others. And it's just phenomenal.
That is amazing. That's what I came up with a slogan a few years ago called Spread the Bread. Share your bread with other people. It may be the one thing that that person needs, and you may be the answer to their prayers just by giving them a loaf of bread. I can't tell you how often I've heard that, especially warts, the wart stories. I'll say somebody gave me a loaf of bread, or my child's constipated. My neighbor brought a loaf of bread and said, no, maybe this will help. But this is absolutely amazing. 1 week, her sugar stabilized. 2 weeks, hormones balanced, that she reduced her shaving and her facial hair. That's amazing. And then husband's extreme IBS, son loving the bread. And I understand that. That is so amazing. And now her sharing it with other people. So you teach classes and you offer classes. Tell the listeners how to find you.
Well, right. My website is Healthy by Design for You, and that's a number 4, you.com. And I actually right now I work one-on-one if someone wants to work one-on-one with me, but I also have a DIY program that has 20 hours of audio. It's on an app. It's amazing. And, people love it because they can do it wherever. And so I also locally will teach classes, as I can.
Okay. And you're in St. George, Utah.
St. George, Utah. Yeah.
That's amazing. Jami, your journey has been remarkable, miraculous. And I know, you've done some other things besides the bread, but the bread was a major part and what kind of got you back on track.
Yes.
Yeah. So
part of my life, it's a daily part of my life.
Yes. I love it. A bean, a grain, and a green at every meal. People always ask me, how much bread do I need to eat? And I'm like, Jesus compared himself to bread. How much Jesus do you need? Every day, every way, every meal. So they're like, really? And I'm like, yes.
Right.
And I've talked to some people that said they weren't seeing as the health benefits that they thought they would see until they really increased their bread consumption. They were kind of just doing a little piece because, they're afraid bread's going to make them fat or whatever. But they said when they really started having it every meal, they noticed a big change. So I'm just so happy to hear all that you're doing to help people find health and wholeness and wellness. And I just am so glad you reached out and reached back out and that we finally connected. And I always like to give my guests a chance to share any final words of encouragement or anything that we left out that you just remembered you want to share. But think about, what you would say to inspire others in this real bread or health journey. What would you like to say to our listeners?
I would like to say that I know that sometimes it can feel overwhelming when we don't feel well and we don't feel like we have the answers, but there is always an answer, and we have the answers and we're happy to share them with you. So don't give up hope, and remember that God designed our body to be fearfully and wonderfully made, and you can heal.
Yes. there is always an answer, and we can seek God, and He promises if we seek Him, He will answer. So, Jami, thank you so much for sharing your story, your wisdom, your knowledge, and being willing to share that knowledge with others. I hope that people research and look you up. As I close this episode, what really comes to mind, I can't help but think of Jesus's words in Matthew 11:28-30. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And you mentioned, people lose hope. They give up. They get confused. And He says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. And you really hit the nail on the head. Health issues can often leave us feeling overwhelmed, weary, and heavy laden when we don't get those answers. And the wisdom of this world can leave us confused and discouraged, like you found out. But Jesus gives us an invitation to come and learn from Him. And His way is not only easy, but it's life-giving. So thank you again, Jami, for sharing your wisdom and knowledge. And I just want to say to everyone, be encouraged today and find rest for your souls and health for your body. And until next time, this is Sue Becker from Bread Beckers with Sue's Healthy Minutes.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Bread Beckers Incorporated, located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.